Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, What Functional Tests Overlook? See it with Visual Testing. My name is Susie. I'm on the events team at Softslab. And before we get started and I introduce our speakers, I just have a couple of housekeeping notes to go over with everyone so you know how to participate in today's event. First of all, when you joined today's webinar, your audio may have connected via your computer's speaker system by default. If you would rather join over the phone, you can just select phone call in the audio pane, and the dial-in information will be displayed there for you. Second, if you have any questions for our speakers, and I hope that you do, please submit them via the questions pane in the control panel. You can send in questions at any time throughout the presentation, and we'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A at the end of the webinar today. And finally, I would like to remind everyone that today's webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive an email with the recording and the slides following the event. And with that, to kick things off, I would now like to turn this over to my colleague, Larry Ho, to share more about Sauce Visual.
Thank you, Susie. Hello, good morning to everyone, or good evening, depending on where you're coming in from. Welcome to our visual testing webinar, What Functional Tests Overlooked? See it with Visual. My name is Larry Ho, and I'm part of the product marketing team here at Softslab, supporting our visual product. Today, I'll be giving a brief overview of Sauce, what visual testing is, and how it can be used to help detect visual regressions. At the end, I'll be turning it over to my colleague, Alex Griffin, our solutions engineer, to show you the UI of the visual solutions, how to add it to your functional tests, and how it works. And then we'll wrap up with Q&A at the end. And as Susie says, if you have questions, also please submit them through the questions pane in the control panel. All right, so we'll begin. So the customer experience has gone fully digital. If you think about your day-to-day, how often are you interacting with the business digitally? How are those experiences? Are they enjoyable? Do you continue to go back, or are they horrible and you go elsewhere? Businesses are going through a digital transformation, adopting or replacing digital technologies or moving to digital process, creating more digital businesses. However, having a digital business isn't enough. Customers expect more, and they expect the experience of interacting with your applications to be nothing short of flawless. So how do you make that happen? What's the difference between companies that are building a thriving digital business versus those that are struggling to find their footing? The answer is digital confidence. What is digital confidence, and what does it mean to have it? It means knowing that you are creating and delivering the best possible user experience for your customers. It means knowing that your web application look, function, and perform exactly as intended before your customers ever interact with them. And most importantly, it means knowing your customers have no doubt that your web application will work flawlessly every single time that they use them. Digital confidence is knowing that they're delivering a user experience that's every bit as good as their customers expect. At Sauce, our mission is simple. We want to create a world of digital confidence, and we want businesses to have complete confidence that their digital applications will work flawlessly every single time they're used. And we want their customers to share in that confidence. So at Softslab, we offer the most scalable and comprehensive test infrastructure in the industry. The Softslab continuous testing cloud spans thousands of browsers, OS, mobile emulators, simulators, and real device combinations, and headless browsers for early pipeline testing. We provide the productivity tools your development team needs to find and fix failures fast, from test analytics to videos, recordings, and screenshots to extended debugging tools and live testing environments, so you can recreate any user error in any environment. And it's the only continuous testing platforms that delivers a 360-degree view of your customer's application experience. So remember, just knowing and having an app that functions as intended isn't good enough. You need to be fully confident in your ability to deliver a great user experience. That's why we built our foundation as the leaders in functional test automation to now offer front-end performance and visual testing. And we're continuing to expand our offerings with our most recent acquisition of API Fortress and Autonomic, adding API testing and scriptless test automation. And we surround it all with the enterprise level security and support you need to manage risk and ensure you get the most value from your investment. So today we're here to talk about visual. So what is visual testing? Going back just a few slides to digital confidence, it means knowing that your app looks, functions, and performs exactly as intended. The key word there being look. Visual testing, also known as user interface testing in software development, is how developers ensure the applications that they're building appears to the end user as it was originally intended. So I want to take a few minutes right here to show you all a game. It's called Spot the Difference. You'll see an image side by side and identify what's different. So we'll just take 30 seconds and see how many diffs you can detect. Okay, how are we doing? And when you're done, feel free to pop them into the chat box, and then we'll see what people have. All right, there was a total of 15. So how did you guys do? Did you catch them all? So when I was doing this by myself, I'll admit I only caught 13 of them. I wasn't able to capture everything. Okay, seeing a couple of numbers come in. So there were 15 totals for those who were playing. Close with 14 in 30 seconds. That's really good. So playing a game and detecting the diffs can be fun, but imagine doing this for hundreds or thousands of UIs, checking for visual changes every time code changes occur. And if there are different browsers or resolutions to check for, it probably won't be as fun as a game, right? So I wanted to share another example. This one is our checkout screen to our applications. For example, we can expect what's on the left, but what if someone was updating a CSS files and now the blue buttons were set to white? Then the screen on the right is what an end user would see. This would leave our customers confused and stuck because they can't take any further action after this. And then if we were to run a functional test to purchase, it would probably pass. So the reason why I wanted to show you the game and this is because trying to identify all the changes can be difficult to do. It's actually pretty hard to get it 100% accurate all the time. And sometimes visual changes aren't as obvious as these were. It could be subtle changes by pixels, hex colors, characters, tags, anything. And then you pile this onto existing issues that QA teams already face, and it could be a little bit too much. So these are just some of the few challenges that QA teams face. So let me know if any of these resonate with you. So manual testing is slowing down the release cycle. Testers have to manually check the UI for visual changes, making testing a bottleneck for delivering features. As a result, organizations lose that competitive advantage of being able to roll out new releases faster. Releasing visual bugs into production. So development teams are unaware of visual impacts of code changes. Therefore, visual regressions aren't caught and deployed, which ultimately affects the customer experience. And then the time spent fixing issues. So hours spent fixing visual bugs that were released, when that time could be used to be productive elsewhere. So these are some of the pain points that QA teams encounter, and having an automated visual testing solution can help significantly. And if you're already running automated functional testing, you're aware that it does not test the visual aspect of the UI. So I want to show you a couple of examples. So this right here is our sauce demo app. It's a swag store with a couple items for sale. We can create a simple functional test to add the item to cart, enter our own information, and check out. And we can write assertions to check a few things on the page. But remember, with assertions, it's only testing what's explicitly been asserted. It's not checking anything else on the page. And to write assertions for every single thing on the page is probably not going to be the best use of time. So I'm going to share a few other scenarios where running a functional test will overlook what's happening on the page and pass the test. So if the store is missing data from the page, guess what? The functional test will pass. It's not going to check for an item's description. And if images are broken, the functional test will pass. It's not going to check for each picture to ensure that each picture is there for the product. And if elements on the page are missing, again, the functional test will pass, leaving the store looking like it has limited merchandise to sell or potentially even going out of business. And if the layout is broken, guess what? The functional test again will pass. It's a poor user experience for the customers and potentially a hit to revenue because users aren't able to purchase anything. And last, if the styles don't load, again, a functional test will pass. We've heard from multiple customers where their functional test passed, but there were still major visual bugs that weren't caught and released into production. So visual testing is a complementary solution to functional testing. Pairing them up together provides additional test coverage. With the visual snapshot, you're able to capture these capture issues similar to those that you just saw during your test and provide the feedback you need to your teams to get it fixed and prevent it from reaching production. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our product, Sauce Visual. So there are two different sets of capabilities available for Sauce Visual. We have Visual Component for testing early in development on individual components. And there are two different ways to use Visual Component. If you're using Storybook for building components and isolations, we have an integration with Storybook for automated visual testings of components built in React, Vue, or Angular. And if you aren't using Storybook, we have a runner tool available for use with your component library. And then we have Visual End-to-End, what we'll be showing later on today. And this is for testing later in the development process. It integrates into existing Selenium WebDriver tests to perform automated visual testing across different browsers and resolutions. Our vision with Sauce Visual is to make it a core component of all our customers' test automation, enabling teams to move fast with confidence and deliver a flawless user experience. And if you think about the testing pyramid and where visual testing fits, it's at the top along with functional and performance testing. These tests typically occur at the later stages of the development process where QA teams are running end-to-end testing. So how easy is it to take a snapshot and actually perform visual testing? As I mentioned earlier, that to write assertions to check for every single thing on the page is probably not going to be the best use of time. It will take a high level of effort to write and to maintain the code. So on the left side here, we see a script that's getting the properties and asserting the values using a functional test. On the right is a snippet of code that replaces everything on the left. You can imagine if you were testing an application form and writing assertions to check for each field, that could be hundreds of assertions and hundreds of lines of code. And we have a saying here at Sauce that a snapshot is worth 1,000 assertions. A single snapshot is all it takes. This is how Sauce Visual simplifies UI testing. So I want to share a quote here from one of our customers. With Softlabs, we have a single visual snapshot for visual and functional regressions, so less assertions are needed. This reduces the complexity of writing and maintaining automated tests. So as I mentioned, less assertions equal less code equal less maintenance. In addition to reducing assertions, Sauce Visual has a feature that we call the Smart Hybrid Diff. And it's called the Smart Hybrid Diff because it takes an image screenshot and a DOM snapshot and compares it from two perspectives, giving you image data and programmatic data. And if you thinking back to the game earlier that we just played, if you were to see this image, could you tell exactly what has changed? It's kind of hard, right? This is an example of pixel-based image diff. You notice that there's a lot of visual noise and it's extremely difficult to tell what's actually changed. From an initial glance, you would not be able to tell from this what's different, so it's not very helpful. A user would need to manually check what's changed, which is going to take more time and mental energy to do. So using the same image, this is an example of what you would see in Soft Visual and what an end user would see. The image on the left is a previously accepted image or the baseline image, and the right is the newly detected image. Any diffs detected are highlighted so a user can quickly see what's changed. Here we can see the header was removed, which is highlighted in red right there. And then on the left side, you can expand the menu to display the change list. That breaks down exactly what has changed. And I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more here. And since there was only one change, the list is short. Here we can see it was a structural change where a div tag was deleted. So I want to share another example that has more changes on it. From here, you can see that any diffs detected are highlighted and can be clicked, which will then open the side panel showing the change list. Each change is automatically categorized into structure, layout, style, and content. Changes are then color-coded depending if it was added, modified, or removed. The cool thing here is users can then toggle on and off changes based on category. So for example, if you don't care about structure change, you can simply disable them through the UI or in your test. This automatic categorization is powerful as users can enable or disable a category based on their needs. For example, if you wanted to ignore all content changes throughout a test, you're able to do that. Or if you want to test layout only, you're able to do that as well. This gives a lot of control as to how you want to perform comparisons. There is the ability to dig in deeper for additional details on each of the changes where you can find out more information, such as if an element moved 20 pixels to the left or an image source attribute was changed. You're also able to ignore specific changes directly in the UI. And you'll see a little bit more of what you can do in the demo in just a little bit. So I know I talked quite a bit, but I'm almost done, and I have just a few things left to share. Automated visual testing is a powerful solution that provides the following benefits. It reduces time spent writing and maintaining scripts. A single visual snapshot can cover hundreds of assertions, which simplifies UI testing. It's able to test both the functional and visual aspects of the UI, simplifying automation while increasing coverage. And it runs tests in parallel for fast executions across multiple browsers, speeding up release cycles, essentially accelerating release velocity. And visual regressions are caught before it reaches production, which is an improvement to visual quality. So I want to leave you with this last quote from Autodesk, our customer. The solution combines an automation testing tool with a visual regression tool. We realized this would save QA time, make it easy to write and maintain tests, and help us debug any issues we uncover. So at this point, I'm going to stop what I'm sharing and hand it over to Alex, who will show you how to add this to your functional tests and demo the solution.
Thank you, Larry. And hello, everybody. That was great, Larry. Thank you for putting all that together. I want to talk just very, very quickly about some of the things that Larry mentioned. The replacement of, and I'll show this here in code in just a moment, but the replacement of assertions with a visual test, I think one more thing that's very, very powerful there is any Selenium command sent over the wire against a cloud vendor, Softslab, of course, but any cloud vendor, that call is going to add time to the test. It's going to add a level of increased brittleness and just another place where there's a possible issue. So replacing assertions with a visual test, which I'll show you here in just a moment, not only makes the code easier to maintain, but it also increases the stability of your test suite, and of course increases test execution time, or decreases test execution time. It increases the speed that it executes because you're not making so many calls. There's not so many hops between where you're executing the tests from and where they're actually being executed against. So I'll show that in code just a minute, but that's an important point that I think is another thing that adds a little bit of value and power to these tests, both right away and then also, of course, over time. So welcome to Sauce Visual. Everybody probably knows this, but a little bit of history and why you're seeing the word screener on the screen. Softslab acquired Screener a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago or so. This is the interface for it, and you'll see some references to Screener. They are a Softslab company. We call it Screener or Sauce Visual. So this is the UI. Welcome to it. You can see it's kind of set up to look like a CI tool, where I've got my builds on the left here. And then on the right, I have my values or the current build that I'm selected against. So in this case, it was a super simple test that just had a lot of states. We can see I had 254 total snapshots that I took there. That's that smart hybrid diff that Larry was talking about earlier. So in this particular test, I had 254 executed against this resolution, specifically against Chrome in this case. Had I tested multiple browsers, they would all be listed here, but this was a simple one just against Chrome. And it triggered some diffs. So I'm going to show you what that review process looks like. Here on this one, this is a really similar example to the Swag Labs example that Larry showed in his presentation, where without me even telling you what's happened here, I'm sure you can understand, even without an introduction into this UI, what occurred. And very similar, this is a real example, like Larry was showing in his presentation, where in this case, it just happened to be this banner, this div that was deleted. So without this, of course, if we were looking at a pixel only diff, this whole page would be shifted up and red, except for the top here, and it'd be really difficult to understand what happened. So a tool like this that understands the DOM and the screenshot of the page and the pixels on the page just gives you quite a bit more understanding and less cognitive effort to understand what happened in a particular diff. If anyone has used visual testing tools that are pixel-based, like a lot of open source tools and other products on the market, by the time you get done reviewing 10 or 15 pages, things are starting to move a little slower, just because it can take so much effort to understand what in the world happened. In this case, the idea is let's make it as simple as possible for the reviewer so that you can spend more time doing the meaningful things like fixing issues or going back through and checking with the UI team to make sure that the difference that occurred was what was intended. Also, as I'm here in sort of this reviewer state inside of the Screener UI here, very easy to accept these. I can accept them one by one like this, use a keyboard to cycle through them or arrow through them if I wanted these differences that occurred here. And then as I'm reviewing, again, I can sort of hover over these. I'm not clicking, just hovering over. And you can see they kind of highlight on both pages to show the changes. And if I click on them, it expands this menu, and then I can really quickly see here there was a like an actual CSS change where a background color was replaced with this new color, font color was replaced with this new color. I can use that information to just double check with like my design notes if I'm the developer, or I can send this information to the UI team and say, hey, is this what we actually wanted to display on Chrome with X resolution? And then this change here, content change, this I mean, extremely easy to understand. And this is a very simple example, of course. There in this H5 tag, there was a 2 added, so it's green. There's a 1 removed, so it's red. I was talking with a customer of ours a couple of days ago about visual regression testing and the difference that it's made in their pipeline. And he told me that relatively recently, they were all the way to the point where they were testing their visual regression end-to-end using this same type of deployment, where they've gone through unit, they've gone through integration, they went through functional, they went through UAT, and then they were getting ready to deploy. And this type of content change difference picked up that in their legalese at the bottom of the page, this was a financial company, it was truncated, and no one caught it through the entire release process. No one thought to look down at the bottom of the page and make sure that the words were all correct. And had they not done visual regression testing and had they shipped that, the implications could have been absolutely massive, both from a legal and financial standpoint. So, this is an extremely simple example, but the implications are incredibly powerful. Even if a human was reviewing like screenshots that were taken through a functional test, which in their deployment process they actually do, still no one caught that there was that small font legalese at the bottom of the page that everybody ignores. But for legal reasons, they need to have out there. So that's some here. I can accept this. That's some of the ways that you can interact with the UI to do things like reviewing differences. If you have gone through all of the different changes and you know that they all are accurate, you can actually take a bulk action here as well and accept all selected. That's a pretty powerful button, though. Of course, in any visual regression process, you want to make sure that anything you accept is absolutely accurate. So I can do that and say yes, and then great. Now my build has passed and my baselines are updated, and I can ship this. So that's a bit about the UI and how you can navigate it. I also want to show 2 more things just very quickly, and then we can get to question and answers. I'm going to show what it's like to integrate this into existing Selenium tests, so how you can plug it in. I happen to be using Java and TestNG. It's no big deal if you're not. We have code examples for every language that WebDriver has a wrapper for, so it's totally cool if you happen to be using a different language. The only caveat there is you need to be using W3C, so at least Selenium 3 or 4. I happen to be using Selenium 3, and I'll show you a very quick way that you can, if you're still using desired capabilities, no problem. If you're using Selenium 3, at least you can use mutable capabilities along with your desired capabilities. Life is good. It's a very quick, easy way to make an update there. So I'll show you that. And then also I'll show you specifically how you can manage baselines, because I'm sure everybody's wondering, okay, this is cool, but what happens when I have my feature branches and my main branch or master branch? How does Screener handle the handling of baselines between those? So I'll show you that as well. And then we'll get to questions and answers. So I'm going to hop into code very quickly here. So when I first learned about this product, one of my biggest questions were, how tough is it going to be to integrate this into my existing tests? You know, if it's a huge undertaking, it's just going to be, you know, how many sprints essentially is it going to require for me to build this actually into my pipeline? And I'll show you here how incredibly simple the lift is from just adding it to your capabilities and then actually adding it to the tests. So this section here is all I added to my existing functional tests to enable, of course, you have to be using sauce. But just to enable testing against sauce's visual product, this from a capability standpoint, so I'm in my desired capabilities object here, I just add these, essentially your API key, name the project, tell us what viewports you want. In this case, I was just using one for simplicity, but you could absolutely add multiple. If you are testing against like localhost and you don't need to care about things like branch or base branch, you absolutely could exclude these. You don't need them. But if you're working against a repository that you want to keep track of, branch and base branch in the code is how you tell Screener or Sauce Visual what you're testing against. And then you just pass that map into your capabilities. And that's it. So then you're ready to test. In the actual test itself, very, very easy. This is one of my, I'm using page object, and this is one of my tests. You just init like this, JavaScript executor, and then you pass it a value, and you say, okay, this is the test that I want to the section that I want to test against. And then in your actual test, you trigger a visual snapshot. So just like in Selenium saying get snapshot, really, really similar process. At the place in your test where you actually want to understand what's happening visually, you just explicitly include this code, one line, and bam, there it is. It will grab it for you. And I really quickly just wanted to show this example as well, because I have, from a functional perspective, a number of assertions here that I was triggering as part of just making sure that my site was functioning correctly. But then I realized that if I just take this one snapshot at the end, I could get rid of all of these assertions. So I could save myself all of those Selenium calls, save that time, and then make my code easier to maintain, because I don't have to worry about these assertions. And that's because on this snapshot, this verify successful calculations snapshot, if any of these numbers were different from these, this just adds items to my cart and then goes to a totals page. If any of those numbers are different, it's going to trigger a visual regression. So I'll find it in my one snapshot instead of having to include all of these different assertions just to make sure that numbers are correct on a page. So that's an example of how I can choose, if I want, to simplify my functional tests at this stage and still perform the actions to get my site into the state that I want it in. So still add the items to the cart and still use Selenium to enter my text and interface with the page. But then I can omit all of these different assertions and have just my one snapshot and use that as my verification that the functionality is executing correctly. So you can choose to do that, of course. You don't have to. Like in this case, I'm performing both verifications. But I am going to make my life easier and take these out so that the test will be even that much better. So that's a quick overview of the lift that it takes to plug this into your existing Selenium tests. Also, it's very possible that you all have understood this, but in this case, if you're still using desired capabilities, just adding this mutable capabilities object is all you need to do, assuming you're using at least Selenium 3. So you don't have to fully update to W3C capabilities. You can still use desired capabilities along with mutable capabilities. So kind of an easy lift there from an update perspective if you're still using JSON wire. So in a moment, we'll get to questions. I just want to show a quick example of how baselines are handled. And other folks from the presentation team, if my internet is slow, let me know if I break up. Sorry, my whole family's here, of course, with COVID, and I think everybody's probably getting online for school. Let's talk about how Screener handles baselines here. I showed you in the code how there was that base branch. Cool. I showed you in the code how there was a base branch value that I can pass through. So that essentially tells Sauce Visual, hey, this is my primary branch, my main branch or master. So in that case, master here, like this middle branch here, this is my home base. This is where the truth is. And then as I create feature branches, they automatically inherit the base branch baselines for me. I don't have to like perform another call or do anything crazy. All I do is submit a test with my base branch value and then my branch value. And that tells Screener, okay, I have a feature branch that I'm testing against now, and it automatically pulls my baselines. And then when I accept those from the feature branch, it automatically updates master. And that new base branch value will update any other feature branches that you have out there from a baseline perspective. So you don't have to worry about pulling in like by hand your primary baseline from a branch to X feature branch that you maybe have been deving on for the last 3 months and you're still working on. You don't have to worry that when you pull that back into master, it's going to overwrite or mess up your baselines in either master branch or any of your features. So Screener handles that for you all automatically. So a very, very easy lift there from a baseline management perspective. Essentially, as long as what is accepted is accurate, then your baseline will be valid. You don't have to do anything special, or you don't have to plan it into your sprint where you like pull in baselines explicitly. And then of course, the inevitable question is, well, what happens if we perform a hotfix or need to roll back? That's no problem. In the UI, if you need to roll back, we have these reviewed states. I can go back in and say, you know what, this isn't what I want. That needs to go away because we're performing another fix, or that has changed or something else. So now that I've changed the status, that the baseline is back to being this. So it wasn't updated. It's reverted back. So that's how you revert. Very, very straightforward from a baseline management perspective. So that was a lot of information. I hope that helps everyone understand sort of how to navigate the UI, and then also how to integrate it at the code level. maybe I'll open it up now for any questions anyone has.
Cool. Let me get back on the screen here. All right, thanks Alex for the demo. As a reminder to the audience, you could still submit questions through the question pane. In the control panel, we'll try to get through all the questions in the time that we have left. We'll take the first one from Mikhail. What's the main idea of visual testing in terms of pixel comparison, screen scraping, or something else? And to follow on to that, what platform is supported? Web-based, desktop applications, Windows, etc.
Yeah. So the platforms is pretty easy. Platforms, at this point, it's web and it's web desktop. So the browsers that are covered are Safari and Internet Explorer and Edge and Firefox and Chrome. And then, of course, I showed you a little earlier, you can specify the different viewports that you want for those different browsers. Larry had talked about earlier, and I had mentioned also, the way that the visual regression testing is occurring is DOM snapshot, so that we can understand what's happening on the page, and then also a actual screenshot, and then those are combined to make the hybrid diff.
Cool, and I have one from Lucky, which is, does visual testing capture and validate font and color in the web page as well? Which kind of answered.
Yep.
Yep. So I have one, how does it handle layout comparison in different resolutions or in responsive UI layouts?
Yeah, okay. So the way that our product works, and I think other kind of visual regression tools work the same way as well, is you're not comparing Chrome to Firefox, or you're not comparing Chrome at X resolution versus Chrome at Y resolution. The baselines instead are specific to browser and resolution. So Chrome at X resolution is only compared against Chrome at X resolution. And then Firefox has its own baseline at whatever resolutions you're testing that on. So you're not like comparing one versus the other that are disparate. You're comparing, making sure that your tests on your site, at least on Chrome, looks exactly the way you want it to look on Chrome. And then your site on Firefox looks exactly the way you want it to look on Firefox. So you're not comparing their Safari versus Edge. You're making sure that it looks good on Safari and then looks good on Edge.
Thanks. We had a question come in from Christopher about why Sauce Visual is better than open source solution. I can actually take this one. So with open source, it's not a full solution. You can consider it a utility. And in order to make them a solution for your team, you actually have to spend time and resources to build your own solution by combining the open source utilities together. Sauce Visual itself is a full-featured and fully managed solution, allowing teams to focus on their task in hand, rather than spending time integrating multiple open source utilities. And we have a full team working to ensure the customer success with visual testings. We provide ongoing support, maintenance, and continue to develop new features for the solution. So we have a couple questions around the baseline. And I'd like to add onto that, which is in the initial first test, this will fail since there is no baseline and you just accept it to establish the baseline. So what's the easiest way to maintain baselines? Oh.
I think the biggest trick there is actually taking the time to make sure that your baselines are accurate, because those are the gold. That's the gold standard. That's what everything is compared against, is the baseline. So from a management perspective, there's not a whole lot to it. You just have to, screener, like I spent some time talking about, probably more than everybody wanted to hear, is SOS Visual Screener manages the baselines for you from a feature branch perspective. So that part is hands off. All you have to do is make sure that when you accept a new state, so that like the value of the snapshot, that it's accurate. As long as you do that, everything else is taken care of for you. It's hands off.
Cool. So I have a couple questions come in for mobile. So some attendees are asking, does this support mobile?
It will. Right now, so the WebDriver plugin that we have now is relatively new for us. So desktop was first because it's just the bulk of what we do at SOS, but mobile is coming. We get that like mobile web would be great, and we get that mobile native would be amazing. Those are coming, but right now it's just desktop.
I have one coming in from Drew. Is it possible to exclude areas of the screen from the comparison, say for carousel elements where it's not guaranteed? I guess in this case, dynamic content is constantly changing.
Yeah. So we explicitly handle in the product video, like autoplay video, and we explicitly handle animated GIFs. So those you don't necessarily have to handle on your side. We handle them on our side as long as they're as long as the value for them are static. Like if it's the same video that plays or the same GIF that plays. But if you have things like rotating ads sections or like a date counter or something that you don't want to always trigger a diff, you have two options. You can include the selectors for those sections in your code to say there's an exclude value that you can pass. You should say, okay, exclude these sections, and you pass the CSS selectors. Or you actually can add a value, a specific CSS value to those sections in your code, on your site code. And then as we're going through and processing the diff, if we see that value, it's like screener ignore, .screener ignore. If that's assigned to any div, we just exclude the div altogether. So you have some options there, but yes, absolutely. We have ways of handling dynamic content.
Is SOS Visual able to detect differences in graphics on an HTML canvas where the DOM hasn't changed?
Where the DOM hasn't changed, but the graphics changed. I think I'd need to see an example. But we do, so by default, we look for changes in the DOM, and then from that, we'll trigger like a visual test to see if there's anything that changed visually in the on the pixels on the page. So the question is, if there's no DOM change, but the pixels changed, is that like an iframe? I'm not quite sure what the structure of that would be. So that's great question. I think at the end of this, or if you don't have it already, grab our contact information and send the question over, and I'll get it answered. That's a good one.
Yep. And I can probably find the email too. We have a question come in. So if a user's crawled the site and has a list of URLs in the CSV file, can they pass that file to SOS to get a scan of each page?
At this point, you would have to execute this as a Selenium test. So in that regard, no, it'd have to actually be a Selenium test. So you wouldn't be able to just pass a CSV to Sauce and have us execute it. That's a cool idea from a visual testing perspective. But in that case, you're not really testing intent, like user intent. You're sort of just testing that the code looks right, I suppose, in like a vanilla state without being interacted against. So, I mean, I suppose you could say in your code, you could do like a loop and pass the URL in the loop and say, take a screenshot for every URL. You could certainly do that, but essentially it'd have to be wrapped in Selenium.
So we have a couple questions on baselines. Where are the baselines stored?
The baselines are stored in our infrastructure. So you wouldn't necessarily need to like download them or worry about storage for them from like a space perspective or how you're gonna manage asset visibility. It's all stored on our side right now in AWS, but that won't be forever.
I have a question coming for CI/CD. How can Sauce Visual be integrated using CI/CD tools like Jenkins?
Yeah, sure. So there's so this is true also with Sauce, just functional tests. There's a value called build that we care about, and it's like Jenkins. I have it called build tag. Yeah, it's just build tag. So that Jenkins applies every time that you, so it's like a Jenkins environment variable that it gives you every time that it runs a suite. And all you really would need to do is execute your Selenium test like normal, point it to Sauce Visual, include the authentication, and then Sauce will execute the test. It will link that test to your Jenkins build. And actually, if you're using the Sauce plugin for Jenkins, it'll the functional side of the tests you'll actually be able to see inside of your Jenkins job as well. But the only kind of nifty part of that is you just have to grab that environment variable that Jenkins gives you for build.
Cool. And I forgot to address this earlier. I see a couple of questions coming in. So Visual End-to-End is available now, so you can actually contact someone at Sauce, or we can contact you to get the conversation started. And also this webinar session will be recorded, and so you will get a copy at the end as well, once we have everything all set. Let's see. How does this support, or how about the support for embedded contents like PDFs, Flash, images?
PDFs and images are absolutely they're a default part of how we process the diff. Larry mentioned earlier the kind of the couple of different ways that we look at the page, the structure, layout, style, content. So those would all fall under content. If you didn't want to ignore an area, but let's say for the entire page, you didn't necessarily care about the content. So the text and graphics, that kind of stuff. You could actually just not have us process the diff for content. Like if you wanted just a blanket, I don't care about it. Otherwise, if it's stuff that you don't want to be part of the diff, like you don't care that it changes, you can use those exclude options that I had mentioned earlier. Or if they are animated and you want them to be part of the diff, like I mentioned, we have explicit ways of handling those. So you don't have to have your video stop or have the GIF not be animated or any of that. We handle those explicitly.
Okay, I think we have enough time for just a few more questions. I know we're running near the top of the hour. So just have a few more in here. Let's see. Will this work in parallel testing using different servers?
Different servers.
Yeah, or is that server?
Yeah, so I'm sorry I didn't point this out earlier, but a big tenet of what Softlabs recommends from a best practices perspective is to parallelize your tests as much as possible horizontally so that they're all executing at the same time. A lot of it's to that, but the primary one, of course, being test execution time or suite execution time goes down, the greater that you can parallelize your tests. Sauce Visual functions exactly the same way, essentially. The tests actually are automatically parallelized for you when you execute the visual tests. So yeah, we handle that on our side, the parallelization. You don't have to really do anything other than just have the right capacity from a sauce side to run them at the same time. If you meant site server, like your site server, that's really handled by the URLs that you're testing against in Selenium. That's from our perspective, you could absolutely test against multiple sites.
Well, I think we have time for just one more question. Let's see right here. Does it work when there is an upgrade in browser versions? Or do we have to replace the baselines to support browser upgrades?
Yeah. Such a great question. I'm sorry that I didn't address that earlier. Yeah, the baselines are browser version specific. And operating system specific. So Chrome on Mac is different baseline than Chrome on Windows. Or like even better, Chrome 87 on Mac is different than Chrome 87 on Windows, separate baseline. So when you're testing, like when 88 comes out and you're testing against it, the very first test that you do, just like Larry mentioned earlier, will fail because you don't have Chrome 88 baselines yet. So yeah, when new browser versions come out, they'll be their own baselines. Same kind of deal with essentially it's a different browser, so you don't want to compare it. You don't want to use it to compare against an old browser or even a different browser because that's apples versus different types of apples. You want to compare same to same. I think we're at time, Larry.
Yeah. Oh. So yeah, so we're at the top of the hour right now. I wanted to thank everyone for attending. Whoop. What did I just share? No, something happened. There you go. So I wanted to thank everyone for attending. I know there was a lot of questions that came in and we weren't able to get to them all the time or get to all of them. Like I mentioned, the slides and sessions will be recorded and sent via email. If you like what you saw, we do want to hear from you. There's a link to fill out a survey. And then also we have SauceCon online coming up in April. Registration is open now. So thank you all for attending.
Thanks, everyone.